So, hello there, and welcome back to yet another Night to the Movies podcast. And in these podcasts, I talk all things movies and TV and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm giving my re-review of Barbie after I watched it for the second time. But just before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello there to my viewers, but you prefer to listen to your podcast, well, guess what? You can with this one too, at Nice the Movies on Spotify, and if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check the podcast out visually on my YouTube channel at Nice the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, wherever you may be watching or listening to the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and leave me some feedback on things to improve on with future podcasts, because there's always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. Also, I should say here, I went swimming earlier today, and when I go swimming, I've spoken about this plenty of times for the channel, but when I go swimming, I get this thing that I like to call fuzzy thinking, where I just can't think straight for the rest of the day. So if I say a sentence or phrase in this podcast today that doesn't totally make sense, that's why, because I've got a bit of fuzzy thinking going on. It's something that swimming does to you. I don't really know what it is, but once you've been swimming earlier in the day, you don't quite think the same way throughout the rest of the day. Hopefully you understand what I mean. So if this podcast isn't the best, blame swimming. But this should be a fun podcast to listen to and or watch nevertheless. So, let's get into it. Barbie, my re-review of Barbie. So, I first saw this film the day after it came out. I didn't watch the day it came out. I planned to, but then other things came up. But I watched this the day after it came out, and I watched Oppenheimer later that day. And that's important, by the way. I'll get on to why it's important a bit later on in this podcast. But I watched Barbie the day after it came out, and I was really looking forward to it. It was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I am a big fan of Greta Gerwig. I think she's a very interesting director. I really like her film Lady Bird, and I also really liked her version of Little Women, which came out in 2019. Bear in mind I haven't read the book, but I really liked that film. And I was really excited to see what she was going to do with a Barbie movie. And I thought all the trailers were great. I loved the cast they got for the film. And I was really excited to see it. And I watched it, and it wasn't for me. That's what my first conclusion was with this film. I watched it and it annoyed me more than it excited and enthralled me. There were some parts of the film which I liked, and I loved all the messages and the themes of the film, but I didn't like the way they were conveyed to the audience, and yeah, the film wasn't for me. That's what I thought the first time I saw it. However, in the weeks since I saw Barbie for the first time, I have heard all these people close to me and all these people that I follow online who I really admire, raving about this film and talking about it in such a positive light. And every time I'd hear someone talking about this film, raving about it, I would think, did I miss something? Was there something which didn't click with me when I watched it for the first time? Do we need to go back and rewatch it? And so, a couple of weeks back, I made a promise to myself that at some point before the end of the year, I would rewatch Barbie. Whether it would be at the cinema, whether it would be on DVD, or whether it would be on streaming, I don't know. But at some point, I would rewatch Barbie. And over the past couple of weeks, there have been some films in cinema which I've been interested in, but particularly over the last week, there hasn't really been much. Like, I was going to go and watch Blue Beetle because I was interested in that, but I'm not too interested in Strays whatsoever. It just isn't like my type of movie. So I thought, instead of going watching Strays and probably wasting my time because the trailer didn't do anything for me, let's go and watch Barbie again. Let's see if I was wrong about the film. And let's just say this. I'm so happy I did. I love this film now. It is fantastic, and that is the power of a rewatch, the power of a second viewing of a film. Because I think, and I'm going to get on to more of the reasons why I may not like it the first time, but I think one of the big reasons I didn't like this film too much the second time is because it was one of my most anticipated films of the year, and I had all these high expectations going into it. These expectations of what I wanted a Barbie movie to be like, directed by Greta Gerwig, what I wanted this film to be like, and it didn't meet my expectations. My expectations got the best of me, and I think that's one of the reasons I didn't like the first time, because I was expecting a different movie, and then when I went to rewatch it, I knew what I was getting myself into. I knew about what the film was really like, and I just embraced it so much more for that. I really got into the film. I was immersed in the world of Barbie Land. I found the story very moving and emotive. I thought the performances were far better than I did think they were the first time. I really liked the performance of the first time. That was one of my big positives of the film. I thought Margot Robbie, Ryan Gosling, Simu Liu, America Ferrera, Will Ferrell, and whatnot all did a great job. But this time, the performances really caught me off guard, particularly Ryan Gosling's performance. And the production value of the film was mind-blowing watching it again, and how Greta Gerwig uses the production and the set design of the film is really something. And I love that I couldn't notice, and I don't even know if there is, but I didn't notice an ounce of CGI in the film. Everything looked practical, everything looked real, and I loved the way it looked, the colour palette, and I just really got into the film, and I was taken by it. It was like I was watching a completely different movie, and I don't really know why that was, but I was really blown away by watching this second time, and it's now one of the films of 2023 for me. I was really surprised by how much it worked to me, because it's creative, it's imaginative, and it's heartfelt, and it's moving, and at the same time, it's wildly entertaining. It's a very enjoyable film, and the musical number that you get with Ken, where he sings, "I'm just Ken, anywhere else I'd be a 10." When he sings that later on in the film, I was completely engrossed in that musical number. I was sat there, and that may be one of the most engrossing experiences I've ever had in the cinema, period. I was completely taken by that moment. And, you know, when I first did my review of Barbie, when I spoke about Barbie for the first time on this channel, I criticised the film for not being a straight-out musical. I think I said something along the lines of, you get this musical number later on, and the thing is, why wasn't this film a musical overall then? Why does this get this one musical number thrown in later on in the movie? It just feels like trying to do too much. And although I still have my criticisms of Barbie, and I do think at times it is trying to do a little too much, I love the fact that we only get the one musical number in this film, and I love the fact that it happens towards the end of the movie as well, because it's almost the big payoff for Ken's storyline, you know, for Ryan Gosling's Ken storyline, and it's really the moment you're like, yes, this is brilliant. It's just thrown in there, and you don't really expect it, yet it becomes, at least for me, the best part of the film, and I love the musical number. It's such a catchy song as well, and I love the character of Ken a lot more this time around, and I also really liked the character of stereotypical Barbie, played by Margot Robbie, the second time around more as well, because those characters are unlikable at the start of the film. That's what I feel there. I feel at the start of the film, both stereotypical Barbie, played by Margot Robbie, and Ryan Gosling's Ken are unlikable. Yet, I think because of the way Greta Gerwig and her real-life partner, Noah Baumbach, who co-wrote the script with Greta Gerwig, I think the way those two write those characters makes you like them more as the film progresses. There's this really great character development that goes on with stereotypical Barbie and Ken throughout the film, which really gravitates you towards those characters and makes you like those characters more as the film goes on. Because when I watched it the second time, I really didn't like stereotypical Barbie and Ken the first half an hour. I thought they were a bit egotistical and seemed a bit like they didn't really care about others. Yet as the film progresses, you see that they do. Well, more stereotypical Barbie, but you do see a lot of characters like with Ken, and I really love how they wrote those characters, and how there's this really, yeah, this moving character development, particularly with stereotypical Barbie, which you really don't expect, which, you know, by the end of the movie almost makes you tear up. It did when I was watching it. I don't know what came over me, but when I was watching it the second time, I was almost tearing up by the end of the film because of how emotive everything was by that point, and how emotional I found the performances, particularly Margot Robbie and Rhea Perlman, I think that's how you pronounce her name, in that final scene. You know what I'm talking about. Well, towards the end of the movie, should I say. I was really taken by the way the storylines progressed as the film went on. I think the Ken character, I think Ryan Gosling's Ken is so good in this film. And side note here, there has been some talk because this film, by the point this podcast has come out, may be the highest grossing film of 2023 so far, and as far as I'm aware, it's grossed over $1 billion worldwide. So there is some talk about this film potentially getting a sequel. I don't think it should get a sequel. I think you should have a spin-off centered around Ken. Call it I'm Just Ken. Honestly, get loads of people going to see it. It'd be a great movie. Get Ryan Gosling back as Ken and have a spin-off movie on him. You don't need to get Margot back as Barbie, or you even could. You could have his cameo in that film. But I think actually making a film centered around Ken might be a better move than doing a straight-up Barbie sequel, because I don't think a Barbie sequel would totally work either. Yeah, I don't think it'd be a totally good idea. So, yeah, there's just a sign up there. If they were going to do a sequel, I think they should do it on Ken. But, back onto what I was saying. I really love the way the characters are written in this film. And one other thing that I absolutely adore, and I can't believe I haven't said this yet, because it was the thing which I really took away from this film, was how funny I found it the second time. Because the first time I watched it, yeah, there were some funny moments, mainly centering around Michael Cera's character, Just Alan. You know, there was some funny moments the first time, and I chuckled a bit in the cinema. But the second time around, I found it so much more funnier, which usually doesn't happen with a movie ever for me. Even some of my favourite films of all time, like Hot Fuzz was one of my favourite films of all time, the Edgar Wright movie, and that's a very funny film. But the more I rewatch it, the more I don't find it as funny, just because I know where the jokes are coming and I've seen it that many times. Yet when I watched Barbie the second time, I found it funnier than when I watched it the first time, which really doesn't ever happen. And like I said, I chuckled a few times in the first time I watched the film. The second time I watched the film, I was laughing out loud in so many moments, and I found the comedy engaging, and it also served this story, which I really, really admired. And yeah, I think the comedy works so well for the most part in the film. There is still some comedy in the film which doesn't work for me, but I found it so much more funnier. And I was watching it at cinema, which was, you know, about a quarter full, and I went midday on a Tuesday, so, you know, that's saying something. It was about a quarter full, and people weren't really laughing, yet I was laughing along, and I didn't care what anyone was thinking, because I found this film funny for the most part. Some jokes don't work, but not all the jokes are going to work, and, yeah, I thought this was a much funnier film than I gave it credit for, and it is a very entertaining movie. It's got some really enjoyable sequences, particularly the musical number when Will Ferrell's character, he plays the head of Mattel, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he does. He plays the head of the company created Barbie, when he's chasing stereotypical Barbie, and I think a lot of stuff with him is really, really good. And yeah, there's some really, really entertaining moments, but it's also very moving. It's also a film about a mother and daughter reconnecting. That's what I think this film is really about, because as far as I remember, and I may be wrong here, so do correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I remember, they never actually say what Barbie Land is in the film. It's all open to interpretation, which I think the best thing is out of the film. And so you can sit there and talk about what Barbie Land is. You know, it's one of those films where you can sit there and talk about what Barbie Land is after you've seen it for hours and hours, and I don't think I ever have a definitive answer. And what I think Barbie Land is a mother and daughter reconnecting when they're playing with their Barbies. That's how I saw the film. Now, I may have read that incorrectly, and you may even say what Babylon is in the film, but what I remember, I think Will Ferrell's character says at one point, it's just imagination, and I think Margot Robbie's Barbie says at one point, don't think about it too much. But that kind of prompts you to think about it more. And I do think the whole idea of Barbieland and what the film is really about is a mother and a daughter reconnecting with one another. And I think that is in the relationship between America Ferrera's character and the one who plays her daughter in the film. And that was a thing which really stood out to me on a second watch. And yeah, I think the film is about a mother and a daughter reconnecting, and I also think it's about Barbie and the controversy that surrounded Barbie over the years, but also the positive effects that Barbie has given to women over the years. And it provides some social commentary on Barbie, which I really liked and, didn't quite grasp onto the first time around. The first time I was watching the film, I was like, whoa, I slowed down a bit. And then when I was watching it the second time, I was going, I don't really know what Barbie is. I've never played with a Barbie doll in my life, and I never intend to, and I don't really care about Barbie as a product whatsoever. But I was really surprised by all the commentary all the social commentary and whatnot that Greta Gerwig put into the script surrounding the product of Barbie. And that's really highlighted in the tagline on this film's poster, which is something like, if you love Barbie, you'll love this movie, and if you hate Barbie, you'll also love this movie. And that is pretty much the perfect way to explain how Barbie is portrayed in the film. They tackle all the controversy, and yet they tackle all the positive effects of Barbie. I really liked how they did that. And the film really took me off guard. And I love the music too. And I love how the needle drops were used, and the song that plays when you see Barbie waking up in Barbie Land. I think the song is by Lizzo. I don't know what the song's called though. The song that plays it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, and it's even a bit like it's talking to the audience as a word. It's breaking the fourth wall. That's what I want to say there. It's breaking the fourth wall, because there's even a line in the opening song which says something on the lines of, when I wake up in my pink world, I get up out of bed and wave to my home girl. And you quite literally see that happen in the film. And there's also a line later in that song, there's a lyric later in that song, which is something on the lines of, I'm still singing. It's like, it's being very self-knowing, and it's being self-reflexive, and it's having its cake and it's eating it too. And that is another thing which I really liked about the music, and the fact that the songs are really good as well. I'm not really a fan of modern day artists. I must admit, this is not for me. I'm more of a Beatles fan. So yeah, I'm not really a fan of modern music whatsoever, but I think the songs in this film are really good. I think this film has some really good music and some really great needle drops, and I think that the music perfectly encapsulates what's going on throughout the film as well. And it's a bit tongue-in-cheek with the music, and it's a bit self-knowing. Yeah, I really like that in the music. And I also really like the performances. I've already spoken about this, but Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie are both great. But what I mean by this is I really like the supporting performances though. Like Will Ferrell, this might be the best I've seen Will Ferrell in anything. And the first time I watched the film, I felt like I was just watching Will Ferrell. I did still the second time a little bit. I will get on to this a bit late, but it's still one of my criticisms that I couldn't totally differentiate between the actors and the characters in this film with a lot of the characters. But in the case of Will Ferrell, it actually made me like his character more, because Will Ferrell in past movies has always played arrogant characters boyish characters who are never really grown up, who are always sex deprived. That's what I felt like that's what I felt like when I'm watching a lot of Will Ferrell movies. It's like he's playing a sex-deprived teenager. And then when you watch him in this film, he's not portrayed in a particularly positive light, I think. And although he's funny, I did find Will Ferrell much funnier than I did the second time around. I also think he doesn't come across the best in this film, and I think that casting is actually genius because everything you've seen from Will Ferrell before and in whatever movie, whether it's Step Brothers, Elf, I mean, he doesn't really play that deprived sex teenager sort of role in Elf, but you know, you get what I'm saying. Whether you've seen Step Brothers, he has a small in Wedding Crashers and plenty of other films. I must admit, I'm not the biggest fan of Will Ferrell, but I've seen quite a lot of his movies. It uses that past perception of Will Ferrell that you've had to the film's advantage, and so when Will Ferrell pops in this movie, you think you'd get one character, and you do, but you also don't. If you get what I mean, I'm not sure if I'm totally making sense there, but I think the casting of Will Ferrell is genius, and I think Simu Liu is great in this film. I much prefer him the second time around, and Michael Cera as Alan. Perfect casting, perfect. Like, I'm a big fan of Michael Cera ever since I saw him in the likes of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World or Arrested Development, which he plays George Michael. You know, I love Michael Cera, and I think he is perfectly cast in this film, and his performance is so on point. And I think America Ferrera is also very good in this film. And what really hit me this second time around was her monologue. Like, I did speak about her monologue in my first review of Barbie, but the thing is, it really hit me the second time around how powerful her monologue is about what it's like to be a woman. Because, if you can't tell, I'm not a woman, you know? And so when I am watching that in the film, I was like, wow, I didn't realise that women had all these weights on their shoulders, and you really feel that in that monologue that America Ferrera delivers later on in the film. And that was a moment I was like, this is quite a sharp and powerful script, but it's also very funny, because the monologue is a bit funny, but it's also, well, it feels completely on point. I can imagine, and I don't know if this has happened, but I can imagine women watching this film, getting to that monologue and going, yes, thank you, someone has said that. Again, I don't know if that's happened, but I can imagine that happening. And I'm not surprised, by the way, that both times I've seen this film, the cinemas have been full of girls, women, and sisters and whatnot. You know, I'm not surprised that both times I've seen this movie, a lot of women have been going to see it, and a lot of females have been going to see this film, because I think it does speak to them. But I also think there is a section of the film which speaks to men. I do think there is. And I think it's also a film that tells us a lot about what it's like to be a woman, what it's like to be a woman, and how difficult it can be, and the perceptions of a woman in society. You know, there's that brilliant sequence in the film where stereotypical Barbie and Ken first go into the real world, and the way they're being perceived by everybody. And, you know, most of the comments actually are very sexist towards stereotypical Barbie. And, yeah, it's really about, I think, what it's like to be a woman in this world, and how difficult the whole idea of Barbie has made that for women, if you get what I mean. That's what it really feels like. And so I think the script is sharp, I think it's to the point, and I think it's very powerful. Right, so this is an add-on. I recorded this podcast yesterday, and I had only really just thought about this. And I thought, well, I have to get it in the review, in my re-review of Barbie. And that is that there's a whole section of this film which is aimed at men. And that is all the storyline. And that's the storyline with Ryan Gosling's Ken. The Ken, played by Ryan Gosling in the film, who is so dependent on Barbie. His whole character arc is that he loves Barbie, but Barbie doesn't love him back. And then by the end of the film, well, I'm not going to go into too much details, but he learns to live with who he is outside of Barbie, away from the stereotypical Barbie played by Margot Robbie. And I think the point of that is that what Greta Gerwig is saying to her male audience, to the male audience watching Barbie, is that they need to learn to live without their female counterparts. And what's funny is in previous comedies and rom-coms and whatever, you have it the other way around. You have the woman who's trying to figure out who she is in relation to the male counterpart she has, or the person that she's in love with, who is usually male. Whilst in this film, it's the other way around. Stereotypical Barbie is trying to figure out who she is by herself, and yet Ryan Gosling's Ken is trying to figure out who he is in relation to Barbie. And I love how that's done, and I love the message of Ken's storyline. And the way I read it was that you have to figure out who you are without a love interest. And I think that is a very interesting and very good message for male audiences watching this film. At least that's the way I read it anyway. Back to the podcast. And also, I think this film is an experience. And that's another reason that I really, really liked it. It felt like an experience. And it felt like I was when I was in Barbie Land, I felt like I was there with the characters. I think the best films feel like experiences. And this film does. This film really feels like an experience, and it feels like Greta Gerwig took you on this ride through Barbie Land, through the perceptions of Barbie, into the real world. Pardon me there. Into the real world, and how it is difficult to be a woman, and how Barbie has affected women and everything like that. I mean, that's the way I read it, and yeah, this film really felt like an experience. Right, so this is an add-on. One thing I want to mention is how much I love, I may have mentioned it already, but I love how original this film is. I love how original it feels, and yes, it's based on a doll and everything like that. Yes, it's based on an existing product, but we haven't had a Barbie movie before. And I love the fact that this movie, that loads of people are going to watch an original film. The fact that it's not a sequel or a prequel or whatever. It's an original movie, and it feels original, it feels fiercely original, and that's another reason I love it. And I do still have some criticisms. I'm not going to say I think it's a perfect movie, because I don't think it's a perfect film. But at the same time, the positives outweigh the criticisms. Like, I still think the film is doing a bit too much, particularly in its later stages. I don't think all the comedy, all the comedy worked for me, and there are parts of the film which at times feel a little messy, particularly as you're getting to the later stage of the film, when the Barbies are trying to take back over Barbie Land. But again, positives outweigh the negatives, and I had I had a lot more fun in this film than I expected to, particularly the second time. And I think the reason I had so much fun the second time, and the reason I was really taken by this movie on a rewatch, was because the first time I was watching Oppenheimer later on in the day. I'm not sure if I've already mentioned this already. But, when I was watching this film the first time, I was watching Oppenheimer later, and that was a film which I was really excited to see. That after Indiana Jones came out, that was my most anticipated movie of 2023 up until I saw it. And so I watched Barbie in the morning, and I watched Oppenheimer in the evening. And I think when I was sat down to watch Barbie, I was thinking, I'm seeing Oppenheimer later. I can't wait to see that. I'd sit through Barbie and Oppenheimer later. Dead excited to see Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan film. Cillian Murphy in the leading role. Gonna be so great. What a cast. Christopher Nolan making a film about the creator of the atomic bomb. Can't wait to see it. And I think that distracted me of my first viewing of Barbie. I think it was I had some distracting thoughts about Oppenheimer, and I don't think my mind was totally on Barbie. And I think that's one of the reasons this film didn't work for me the first time, because I was thinking a lot more about Oppenheimer. And also, the first time I saw this film, my I had about 1,000 things going on in my head at the time, and I'm in a much better place now than I was about a month ago, or was it 2 months ago even, when the film came out, when Barbie first came out, and when I watched Barbie, like I said before, I had about a million things going on in my head, and I had a much calmer mindset when I watched it the second time, and that might be another reason that I preferred it. But I think the biggest reason I preferred it this second time was because I watched it for a second time. And I think that really helps. My most anticipated movie of the year was Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny. And I watched that twice on the day it came out because I knew that after my first viewing, my thoughts wouldn't completely make sense, if you get what I mean. Like, I knew that I had to see it a second time to really get my thoughts in order about what I thought about the film, because my expectations were going to get the better of me. I knew that was going to happen when I watched Indiana Jones the first time. And Barbie, although it wasn't my most anticipated movie of the year, it was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. And I think I needed to watch it twice before reviewing it. I need to do that more of my most anticipated movies. Like, I am so excited to see Napoleon later this year, the new Ridley Scott film, and I think I'm going to watch it twice before reviewing it. I mean, I say that, and I probably will, but the point I'm making is I think a rewatch can really change perception of a film, and sometimes for the worse. Sometimes for the worse. I've rewatched some films I thought were great in the past, and it really made me dislike them. But in this case, and in many cases, I have rewatched films and I've ended up liking the film far more than I did the first time. And I think a rewatch with Barbie really made me love it more. I mean, really made me like it more even. I didn't even love the film the first time. I didn't even like it. And yet this time, I was immersed in the film from the get-go. And I really liked the film as it went on. And then walking out and was like, yeah, you know what? I love that film. And so that is the power of a rewatch. And I really wish I rewatched this film earlier so I could get what everyone was raving about. And now I finally do. And I'm so glad that it's made all this money. And I'm so glad that people are going to watch it. And I'm so glad that I now can say that I think Barbie is fantastic. I'm so glad that I can sit and say that it's a very good film. Because before I couldn't, and it broke my heart. But now I can sit and go, Greta Gerwig, she made another brilliant film. Do I think it's Greta Gerwig's best film? No, I still think Greta Gerwig's best film is her version of Little Woman, which I found really moving and beautiful. And I don't know if I prefer this film over Lady Bird. In fact, I might prefer this film over Lady Bird. I really like Lady Bird. I thought it was a really clever coming-of-age movie. But I might prefer this just because of how entertaining it is. Because there are parts of this film which really, really shouldn't work. But I found it very entertaining. Those parts that shouldn't work, I found very entertaining. Like when Rob Brydon pops up as an older Ken. It's something like that. Yeah, he pops up as an older Ken. I felt that moment so much funnier. And I found all the Kate McKinnon stuff so much funnier the second time around. And on the topic of actors, by the way, I haven't spoken about this yet in the podcast. I don't think I have anyway. On the topic of actors in this film and the fact that this movie has this huge famous cast. I've spoken about this on a past podcast in the last couple of weeks, how I have this problem, and it might just be me, I think it is just me, when I'm watching a movie like a Wes Anderson film, or like Ocean's 11, or like Oppenheimer, or like Barbie in this case, where you have these huge famous casts, and it takes you out of the film because I'm going, oh, that's such and such about it, and in this case, oh, that's Margot Robbie, that's Ryan Gosling, that's Simu Liu, that's Ncuti Gatwa, that's Emma Mackey, that's Michael Cera, and so on, so on, so on. And I did have that again in this watch, but it actually added to my enjoyment. I don't know how that happened. Again, it was like I watched a completely different movie. So I do still have a bit of that huge famous cast problem with this film. I'm not going to sit and say I don't because I'll be lying. But as I've already briefly spoken about in regards to Will Ferrell, it added into my enjoyment of the film. Like, there's even a moment in the movie where Helen Mirren's narrator makes this joke about Margot Robbie's looks, and it is meant to be self-referential and whatnot. And I think you are meant to watch these characters within the parameters of the actors that are playing them. And I think that's what's meant to make it better. I don't know if I'm making any sense. I really don't. Because, again, fuzzy thinking, and if you can't tell already, I am sweating buckets. But the point I'm making is the huge famous cast problem really, really didn't bother me with this time around. It really, really didn't bother me this time around. And, yeah, I love this film now. I love it. I'm so glad I'm saying that, because I was really afraid that I was going to rewatch it and dislike it even more. But I must have just been in a really bad mood the first time I saw it. Or maybe I was a bit self-conscious, because I went into the cinema the first time I saw this film and everyone was dressed in pink, like everybody in the cinema. And the cinema was 3/4 full, which isn't usually the case with the cinema I go to. And yeah, everyone was dressed in pink and I was dressed in black. I was dressed in all black, and so maybe I was a bit self-conscious when I first saw it, and maybe that distracted me from my viewing. But watching it a second time, yeah, it was like I watched a completely new, different movie, and I can see why everyone's raving about this film. Do I still have some criticisms? Sure. Do I think it is a bit baggy in parts? Do I think there are too many storylines? Do I think that it's trying to do too much in parts? And do I think that some of the comedy falls flat? Absolutely. However, it's a great film. It is a bang of a movie that's both wildly entertaining and very moving. And I am surprised how much this film worked for me the second time. More than anybody. Like, I am shocked that I came out of this film the second time and went, I think I love the Barbie movie now. Because, as I've already mentioned, I have no connection to Barbie whatsoever, and yet I think this film is clever, emotive, funny, and very, very enjoyable. And so on a rewatch, I'm going to say that Greta Gerwig's Barbie, I'm going to say it's an 8.3 out of 10. Yeah, this is one of the films of the year so far. And even so, I do still prefer Oppenheimer, because for me that is still the film of the year. This is a very good film. And I think the light that I shined on Oppenheimer took away the light that I wanted to shine on this film a little bit. And so now that I've seen Oppenheimer twice and I can step back on it and go, yeah, love that movie, I think it's given me the opportunity now to go and look at Barbie in a different light. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. I think now that Oppenheimer's been and gone, Barbie is having its time to shine for me. I think a lot of people, had that time to shine with Barbie when it came out, but I didn't. I think it's because both films released the same day, and I was really excited to see both of them, but I was more excited to see Oppenheimer, and that distracted me, and I thought Oppenheimer was a miles better film. But after Oppenheimer's been and gone, I'm glad that I can say that Barbie is a great film now. I can finally say some good things about Barbie. I finally think that I can give Barbie its moment. For me, anyway. And, I don't know how much of this review is making sense because my head is spinning right now. But the point I'm making is that I was wrong about Barbie. I was wrong about Barbie the first time I saw it. This film is fantastic, as I've already said twice, but I'm gonna say more. This film is fantastic. It's got fantastic needle drops in there, which perfectly encapsulate what going on in the film. It's got all these different reads you can take from it. It's a film which you can discuss for hours and hours after. It's got a great musical number of Ryan Gosling singing "I'm Just Ken," and anywhere else that would be a 10, which gets stuck in my head daily now. It's got incredible performances. Honestly, wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Gosling gets nominated for an Oscar. I'm not going to bet that it does, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does. It's got production design, which is mind-blowing. Like, if people haven't seen already, the set photos and the behind-the-scenes videos of them making this movie it just shows you the passion and the love that went into this film, and shows you how much fun they're making this film, and it also shows you the level of quality just with the production itself, and I think that really comes across on screen. And I think it's so well directed, which one thing I haven't really talked about in this review, but I did talk about it in my first review. So yeah, I still think it's very well directed, very well written, and I think it's a great film. I really do. And I can't believe I found it funny the second time. But there you go. Anyway, I've been rambling on about Barbie, so I'm going to round up just before we get to the 40-minute mark. I'm going to round up with my thoughts on Barbie by saying that this film, I was wrong about Barbie, and yeah, it is one of the films of 2023, and it shouldn't be as good as it is. The fact is, it is. It is. It's a brilliant film that I now love, thanks to watching it a second time. And so, all in all, as I've already said, I'm going to say that Barbie is an 8.3 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that is it for my podcast for today. If you've seen Barbie, let me know your thoughts on the film, and if you watched it a second time, maybe you liked it more, maybe you disliked the film after watching it for a second time, and if that's the case, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, because I'd love to hear what people are thinking about Barbie. So maybe they watched it when it came out and they have a different perspective on it now. Now they've had it, now they've let the film sink in a bit. Whatever your thoughts on Barbie, let me know in the comment section below, and if you haven't yet, please click down below and like, subscribe on this podcast, and look forward to many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. Thank you for always watching or listening, and I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now. Bye.